Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. And yes, this vise is the reason that I bought this house. So let's install it. Okay, let's start off this project by blowing out my back. No, actually, it's within the range of what I can do, but it's close to the edge. I had thought about installing a winch into the ceiling and moving it back and forth, but I'd actually have to have a couple of them, and then there'd be other ways of holding it up, and it's actually just a little quicker and easier to lift it up. If you attach a pole onto it, it allows me to be able to flip this over relatively easily, at least right now. Once I put legs on it, that'll be a different story. Maybe then we'll be attaching things to the ceiling. So we'll see. But now we need to bring over this beast. And yes, this is the reason that I bought this house. It wasn't big enough to fit on my last bench, and so I needed a bigger bench, but a bigger bench wouldn't fit in my shop, so I needed to build a bigger shop, and it was easier to buy a house than to build a new shop. And so here we are installing this in a new bench in a new house. Kind of cool. But first we want to take this bracket off, and we need to create a recess for this to go in, and I'm going to put it in a little bit under the surface of the bench. I don't want it to be flush because I don't want things sliding off and hitting it, and plus we're going to be taking off a little material off of the top of this bench as we go. So I'm going to lay out the lines all the way around, chop in a little ways, and then I'm going to pair in on these series and leave the little bit in the middle, and this will allow me to come into the router plane and clear out the majority in between. I have my depth gauge to come in and make sure that I'm getting close to it and not going past in any particular place. And then it's a series of chop in, pair out, chop in, pair out, chop in, pair out until we get close, and then we can come at it with the router plane and clean it all up. This really makes things a lot of fun. But now we need to get rid of those middle pieces, and that's actually pretty easy. You can just come in with a chisel and pop them out and just eyeball the measurement in between, or maybe even make them a little bit lower than the surface on either side, because the plate coming in is just going to sit on whatever is the highest surface. So we can remove those out, pound this down in, and see how she fits. Yay! Off camera, I did also chop out the front face as well. I don't know why I didn't have the camera on for that, but oh well, there it is. Now we can pick up this vise, which itself is around 80 some pounds. Actually, it might be a little bit more than that. It's significantly heavy and very awkward. We can lift it up, put the pins in, and see how she fits. Now the problem is we need to remove a lot of material on the back of this so that it will swing up. It's designed to fit on a bench that's 1 3/4 inches thick, or a maximum of 1 3/4 inches thick. And so we need to have all of this chopped out. Basically, the center of the screw on this is going to be going right through the edge of the bench. And we need to come down about 2.5 inches long distances. This means we need to chop out a lot of material. And yes, it really hurt to chop a material out of this beautiful slab that I've been working on, but that's what we've got. So I'm going to lay out all the measurements and figure out where this is, and then I'm going to draw a circumference on the end here, and this will let me know how deep down I need to go at any one particular place. Once I draw that circumference on there, then I can come back in and measure exactly how deep it is. I can use an auger bit with a depth stop on there and then march along that and take out the majority of the waste with the auger bit. It goes a lot quicker. And yes, I'm going to be using the demon-possessed electric brace, because, well, I don't want to drill 200 holes by hand, and it's a lot of material in here. So each of these lines, we're going to then measure down how far we can set it on there, set the stop on it, and then do a line of those. And then we can drill out more, and drill out more, and drill out more, and drill out more until all of these holes are drilled, and we can come back and remove all of the chips. And then you can see the outline of how this is going to be on here. The nice thing is at this point, things really start breaking out easily, and this is really kind of fun when all of these chunks just pop out. And it gets us relatively close to our lines. I have this large gouge that I picked up a few years ago, and I don't use it very often, but every now and then I'll come across a project like this, and this is just the tool for the job. And it allows me to come in very, very quickly and remove the majority of these chunks and pop them out. And then I can come in with a regular chisel and get closer to the line. For the actual chopping out on the line, I can come in with the chisel bevel down and gouge back in towards the line. It was a lot of holes, a lot of holes. So here you can see what I'm talking about with the chisel coming in and running down along the line. I'll use it bevel up for the first section, and then I'll flip it over to bevel down and ride the bevel around that curve. And it actually goes out pretty well. Just take it little bit by little bit, and I can't quite get the bottom with that because then the bevel hits the top edge. But in that case, I can bring in the gouge and clean out the bottom and everything that it can't clean out with the regular chisel. And it actually works out really well. I was very pleased with this. Now, I'm not looking for anything beautiful or smooth on here. This is going to be the bottom side of the bench, and it's just the housing that fits the mechanism underneath. And I just want to take out enough material so that this functions and works properly and isn't impeding anything. But I don't want to take off any more material. The idea is to take off as little as possible to maintain the structural integrity of the bench, which isn't going to be really hard because this bench is over 4.5 inches thick, so it should be okay. But each of these steps get smaller and smaller as there is a square segment, and then the screw sticks out the far end of it, and so we want to make sure that everything pops in there. At this point, I realized, wait a second, my measurements are off somehow, and I don't know exactly where that was, but we had to come back through and remove a little bit more material. I'd rather it be this way than the other way. This means I get to get closer to my line and take off a little material rather than try and add things back on. It's always best. You can see how it will spin in there, and then it will adjust in and out. So as the jaw opens and closes, this whole screw will move away and move back, and it's just really pleasing how this all comes together. It is a yeah, I'm happy. I'm so happy. But the next step on here is to put on this arm, and this is what actually will lock this in at an angle, pivoting it up towards the top of the bench. The problem is it's designed to go on a much thinner bench, so I actually have to recess this in about 1.25 inches to get it down to a place where it will work. So we're going to mark out exactly where it is, and then play this same game again, and drill out a bunch of holes and remove out most of the material. And this one goes really, really quickly. We're just chopping back to the line. I'm actually making it a little bit larger than it needs, so I have a little bit of wiggle room on this. That way I can make sure I put it in the exact location. If it's out of alignment by too much, then it starts to jam up and become hard to use. It's a little deeper than my router plane will go, and so we're just going to use the chisel bevel down and run in there and clean it all out. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean. It just has to be clean enough, and then there are 4 screws that mount this down in. And so you can see how this arm will slide on here, and when it goes in there, now you can lock this, and it will lock that arm, which will then lock its positional angle as it rotates up and down. And I want to make sure I have the full movement from all the way flat to all the way back down. And then you can see how this rotates in here. And so there are 2 levers. One will lock the rotation and one locks the angle. And this thing is a lot of fun to play with. And yes, I did play with it quite a bit. But the problem is I want to really play with this, and that means it's upside down. And I don't want it to be upside down, so that means we need to flip it again. So we put the pipe back on it, lift it up, flip it over, and now it's starting to get really heavy because that vise is probably 1/5 of the weight of the whole rest of the bench. It's significant. So yeah, we're going to have a little bit of fun with this, and don't drop it on your toes. But now it's up, we can actually play with this and see how it goes, and I am really happy. It's amazing and just enjoyable when this thing actually swivels and runs and goes back and forth without any issues in here. So it's got this full range of motion. You can connect anything you want at any particular angle, and I am really looking forward to using this. I've had the little one for a while, and I've really enjoyed that on several projects, but it'll be nice to have this big one that will allow me to do some really crazy things, because it's nice when you have a weird shape and you can hold it dead on. So this makes me happy. So you can see I can loosen this up, and then I can adjust this all the way up to flat with the bench or any angle in between and lock it there. And then I can loosen this and then rotate this head to anything I want. So if I want to use a thin face, or if I want to use these metalworking vices on here, or I've got these dogs that I can tap in and out. Not to mention, the jaw can have a bit of a skew on there, and I can lock it to any angle on that. So it doesn't matter what I need to grab or what orientation I should be grabbing it in. I can always have something to hold it there and a way to clamp it down. So there you have it. And some of the questions that I'm sure will come up
Yes, I put this on before building the legs, and that's because I really wanted to have this in so I know exactly where I wanted to put the legs on the bench. Also, it'd be much easier to install this because I have to flip it back and forth. It'll be easier to do that without the legs, because with the legs, it just gets really big and heavy. And I'm going to be putting the other vise on the other end, a twin turbo. That will be going on as well before I build the legs. So yeah. Also, you'll notice that I didn't inset this into the bench like I did in my other one. I left the bench flat here. And that's because on the other one, it was on the side of the bench, and I wanted to keep that flat so I could actually joint boards up against it. In this case, it's on the end, and it doesn't need to be, and it's almost the full width of the bench, so it doesn't need to have that on there. Some of you will also notice that I put in simple screws in holding this down. I will be replacing those with much better quality hardware and actual good flathead screws and bolts that go all the way through this, but I'm waiting until I actually do the final installation on this. So I'm going to take this off, build the vise on the other end. I'm going to build the legs and the structure for this, and then I will finally put this back on and put in the final hardware that will lock it all down, as well as build the handle that will run this. So yes. And the big question that a lot of people are going to ask, yes, I did actually buy this house because of this vise. And yes, my wife knows that, and yes, she understands it, which means I have a phenomenal wife. But honestly, yes, we bought this vise, and it was my dream vise, but it wouldn't work on my current bench. And so that meant I needed to build a bigger bench, but I couldn't fit the bigger bench in the last shop. So we were going to build a bigger shop onto our last house, but it was cheaper to buy a new house. And all of that came because I bought this vise. So yeah, if you want a bigger house, buy a bigger vise. That's really not good advice. But this is a good vise. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, I'm really looking forward to doing more on this bench. The next video is going to be putting on the twin turbo vise on the other end, and then we'll get into the leg structure, and we've got a lot of things doing. This is going to take quite a while because it's a really heavy bench. Every time I need to move it to do something, it's a lot of work. So stay tuned, and we are going to have a lot of fun with this. But if you do have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those down in the comments down below, as well as liking, sharing, subscribing, you know, all those things. Really, it helps us out. It means more than I can say. So hitting all those buttons down there, thank you. But if you really want to help us out and allow me to do more crazy things like this, like buy a vise and then buy a house for the vise, then think about joining these people over here. They're the ones that fund this craziness. And without patrons and members like you, we wouldn't be here. You are the reason that Wood by Wright exists, and without you, we would not be here. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more about that, then think about becoming a member, links down below, all those things you know. I think they'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. It's usually around this point that I say, wow, this is my biggest vice, and yes, my wife knows about it. But I'm sorry, you know, dad joke and all. But I have to say, it's really not wise to tell dad jokes. And that's a good piece of advice.